Okay, I'm starting a live stream, and you have to apologize. I'm just trying to get my chair all straightened up. Okay, welcome to my live stream. This is a opportunity to get things done. In fact, I'm actually going to complete things because I actually have things I have active now, and I did not do that, and I will do that now. So let's go do that now. So I can do that while I was thinking I was going to do it, but forgot to do it. So I'm just starting up some stuff here. This is a video conferencing system. It's free, which is nice, where you can actually create a call-in show, call-in event, I guess, using this tool. I'll just say, let's talk. Enter the room. Yada, yada, yada. Okie dokie. It looks like it's active. This is the HTTP. And just to validate that it's active, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to see, join the room. And I'm going to start my virtual camera on my OBS because that's what I want to do. Okay, good. Start. Okay, good. Okie dokie. This is because it's infinite, because it's basically reverting through. But again, this is showing that that tool is active, which is good. And we'll just move it over to the side so it's there. And I actually will make this a part of my stream. So let's go to YouTube. I'm doing more technical stuff to start off this little wacky. Okie dokie, my studio. Gonna go to my content. I'm gonna go to my live streams. Gonna go in here. And I'm going to place this here. It's strange I don't allow you to go up. I'm actually going to go down one more. Okay, so we'll save that. Okay, so the people viewing my webcam will see that now. And let's just make sure. Because I'm always wondering, did they see it? Did they not see it? Because you never know, because these systems, they may give the impression that they work a certain way, and you go find out they don't work that way, so that's what's annoying. Okie dokie. So that's my viewing of my thingamajig. And more. There we go. Okay, good. And I will actually add it to the chat. Okay. Okay. And I will pin that. Pin message. There we go. There we go. Okay, good. Everything is in place. So, again, this is my live stream. And as I've mentioned before, I'm talking about the existence of God, the reasons for people believing in the existence of God, and I'm continuing that. And I want to talk to people. I don't really want to review videos, even though that's what I've been doing just to get my channel active again. And reviewing content that I've gotten on the internet from web pages and on YouTube specifically. Just getting content that's talking about the validation of the existence of God, and then giving my input on it, giving my evaluation, I guess, to some extent, maybe a bit of critiquing, because there's sometimes I do go in and I do find question marks, and sometimes I find mistakes, and I'm not afraid to say that what I see as a mistake, and I'll point it out. Now, I'm not to say that I want people to feel like I'm attacking and that. I'm not attacking. I'm just reviewing and evaluating. And if I find something wrong, I'm going to point it out. It's also the absolute right for people who maybe be the ones purporting this or believing in maybe something that I find questionable to come back and let me know the reasons why it is correct. And we can have that discussion too, because that's what I want to get into. I want to get into the discussion of why it's true, the explanation of it's true, and the movement back and forth about the different perspectives of why somebody may question it and why somebody may specify that as actually a truthful representation. So we'll leave that there. This is my continuation of my web stream. Excuse me. I'm saying things just out of the blue without even thinking about what I'm saying. This is a continuation of my channel. I'm attempting to get my subscription list up, as I've decided to actually get a subscription process moving, where I can achieve the minimum requirement from YouTube with respect to revenue generation, which is 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 watch hours. So if you do view this video and you do watch it as much as you can, that would help me out great. If you subscribe, that would be fantastic, and I would really appreciate it if you do. And if you can, again, that would be fantastic. And I would certainly be very appreciative if you did that. In the context of this particular stream, I've got some things I'm going to be doing. One of them is actually going over a discussion with a video that I saw about Francis Collins, I think that's his name, Francis Collins. Well, excuse me, I'll just make sure. Dr. Francis Collins, yes. I'm sorry, I don't remember his name off the top of my head. I remember him in general, but I don't remember his name specifically. He was one of the leaders of the process of the DNA sequence evaluation of the human genome. And he was part of the group that actually investigated that and was able to not generate, because that's actually not the right word, because it wasn't being generated, it was being I'll say somewhat discovered, even though we did know that the genome was there. We just didn't know the extent or the content, I guess, of the genome. And he was part of that process of being able to build up the representation of the DNA model of the human genome at the university he was at, which I don't know. I don't know if I think it was a university. Maybe it could have been a government organization. I actually don't. Well, I'm talking about it, and we do have the internet, and from what I understand, the internet is a good place to research. So why don't we do that? Dr. Francis Collins, and we'll see what he's all about. Francis Collins, Wikipedia, which is always a good place to go to get information. Okay, yada, 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 that's how old he is, yada, yada, President's Collins. So he actually, he served as Director of National Institute of Health in the United States, 2009 to 2021, so he was there a good amount of time. Announced his retirement public, so he retired. Well, again, he's not that young anymore, so that makes sense that he would retire. Before appointed Director of NHA Colin Human okay. So actually, he did this research for the human genome before he joined the National Institute of Health in the United States. It says here, Collins led the Human Genome Project and other genomics research initiatives as Director of National Human Genome Research Institute, one of the 27 institutes and centers at NIH. Okay. So, it was a government organization. It was actually a sub-organization inside the NIH. that I guess specifically do this type of research that he was involved with, and that's where he did that research. So, again, that's his background, that's his history. And we're going to be we're going to be going over a video of him talking about his belief in God. And he actually is a very religious person. And in the video, he's going to talk about how he... can't think of the way I want to describe that, but it's more along the lines of, I think he did mention that he may have been more atheistic while he was younger, and he said in his description in this video, talk about the aspect of how he evolved into being a more follower of religion, follower of Christianity, as that's the religion he follows, and how that progressed along. And he goes over that, and we're going to go over that to see, exactly how he looks at it, what does he believe in, to see what we can see about this extremely intelligent man and how he looks at the concept of religion. So we're going to do that. We'll do that a little bit later. Now we're just going to probably do some reading. And I've just did a little search here. Why do you believe in God? Which is basically the big question I have. And so, why do you believe in God? See what kind of websites come up with that. And we can see there's some came up. Crossroads ABC, I've already been in there. Oblate School of Theology, I've been in there. I think I actually did review why I believe in God before. The Think Institute. Why do you believe in God? Here's my answer. It's interesting. The Think Institute... I get my aspect of saying is this a scientific organization or is this a somewhat religious organization trying to present themselves as a scientific organization, and to me, skewing the actual presentation of themselves? I prefer that they represent themselves more concretely or more accurately. And if they're not doing that, that actually does bother me, because it kind of like trying to saying, hey, I'm trying to fool you, which, is a little bit annoying myself. Okay, so the Think Institute, and actually I'm thinking that actually is what it is, because just reading the introduction title inside the YouTube thing gives the impression that's exactly what it is. Okay, here. Equipping Christian men to become the worldwide leaders their families and churches need. Okay, well, yeah. So it does look like this. It does look like this is just a organization of religious people that are obviously talking about religious, ideas, concepts, and promotion of religion. I don't like the title of their organization, the Think Institute. To me, I'm thinking, ooh, is this like Einstein? Einstein was big on thinking. In fact, a lot of his theories and ads is all revolve around about the concept of, like, I think he called them like a thought experiment. And as I read this, I said, oh, this must be like Einsteinian kind of like way of looking at stuff, and it's not. And I do not like it when they do that. And that's me here, and it sounds like I'm criticizing, but I think the criticism is honest, because to me it gives a misrepresentation of the organization via the naming of the organization. To me, I would have preferred something more along the lines of, the men who follow God, as they seem to be specific about men in the titling description here. Something along that line. So you can just say, when I read the title, I know what it's about, because when I read this title, I have no idea what this organization's about. I'm thinking it's about a more academic-like organization, and they may call themselves academic. I don't know. But again, the titling of it doesn't give me that. Equipping Christian men to become the worldview leaders their families and churches need. To me, it's got nothing to do with kind of like academia, concepts of, things you would see in a more academic scenario. To me, it sounds like more looking on lines of how are they propagating the aspects of preparing men to be in the forefront. And I really don't know why you need to be religious. And that's another question mark I have for this too. It goes, Why do Christian men need to become worldview leaders? Why? Why do they need to be? Is it important for them to be? And if I went through any documentation here, is they're going to be talking about the aspects of it's Christian men who have been in the forefront, I'm thinking, why aren't they doing this with Muslim men? Why aren't they doing this with Hindu men? Why aren't they doing this with one of the numerous, Asiatic religions? Are those men not possible to become worldview leaders? Because a lot of them are. A lot of them are. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there. You saw me babbling about that. So the Think Institute, I'm just not going to because I don't like the way they titled themselves. And I'm getting the feeling just from reading the title description that it's not what I'm going to want to be able to read. Okay, this one's easy. Well, Reddit. Reddit actually is a social system, and I am not really. That's basically people talking about their intrinsic beliefs. Just 1 second here. I have to check something out. Just pardon me. Play the music in your minds if you don't have any music around you. Nope. Huh. Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Excuse me again. Sorry. You'll notice probably in my videos I'm scratching myself a lot and just the fact that I'm constantly itchy. I can't go more than like 30 seconds without being itchy. So you're going to see me scratch myself a lot. And I know I scratch myself around my nose a lot, and unfortunately it's itchy, but I'm trying not to do anything more aggressive than that. Kuza app. Why do you believe in God? God attempts. I wonder why it's called Kuza app. Okay, well, since I'm here just doing stuff in general, and we're going to the aspect of saying goes, well, how do you know that this organization is what you think it is? Well, you go research them. Let's see what Kuza app is all about. Kuza app. Kuza. Yeah, probably just going to the same place. Digital disciples materials for African youth. Okay, I don't know if Kuza is a word in the African community. Devotional parables for. I don't know why they call it an app. Is it an application? It looks like they're showing the aspect of it on mobile devices. What is a good leader? Suma Luke. Yeah. It seems to be very social based. I'm not really sure about that one either. Psychology Today. I say, yeah, that'd be good. Why don't we just go over to the actual site to see. Okay, David Luden, PhD. Who is this David Luden? He says he has a PhD, so he has a doctorate, which means he's got a high level of education. I've only got 5 years of post-secondary, so I'm at somewhat almost a master's level. But David Luden, Georgia Gwinnett College, so that must be where he does his stuff. Psychology Today. David Luden, he's got his own Wikipedia page, I think. Is it the same person? Okay, I'm not sure if this is the same person because there's not much in here, so his Wikipedia is very small. Okay, I think he might be a I was going to say psychologist, but no, not a psychologist, a person of history, I guess, because this first part here is talking about the aspects of how evolution of religion occurred. I'm still interested in finding out what his background is. Okay. Talking apes. I can see right there, psychology, okay? Psychology today, I was thinking maybe history, but now, with reading more of the page itself, I can see that potentially maybe he's a psychologist, maybe a psychiatrist, but the psychologists are usually the ones that do all the research. Yeah, okay, here, professor of psychology at Georgia, Psychology Today, okay, so that's what, yeah. He's a professor of psychology, so he's a psychologist. I don't know if that actually is the right word, psychologist. It sounds right, doesn't it? I'm kind of... Yes, psychologist. Yeah, that's the right way to say it. A psychologist is a mental health professional. Okay, yeah. I'm thinking like psychologist. That doesn't sound right. But, okay, so we have this article here. Let's go over it because I'll say it's a more scientific kind of article, but talking about the content that I'm interested in talking about, but in probably the means of the way that I would look at it, which is more of an evaluation process, and not so much just the idea I've listened to why things should be followed or adhered to inside this organization. Okay. My live stream is going. I'm hoping people will see it and they want to join because that would be great. But I don't see anybody joining. That's too bad. I would have liked people to join. Well, what can you do? What can you do with an English muffin early in the morning? Okay, let's read what this guy has got to do. Okay, I'm not going to read the key points. So let's just start reading this. Okay, it's not too long. So we'll just read it. Why do people believe in God? For most people in the world, the answer seems obvious because it's self-evident that God exists. The question I ask to anybody who says that, I says, okay, can you show me what that self-evidence is? And a lot of times when I do discuss this, I don't really discuss it a lot with religious people, but whenever it does come up to it, is because it's self-evident. It's conceived as just, can't think of the words I want to use again, but it's more along the lines of, that's just correct. It's self-evident because it's self-evident. You don't need to think about why it's true. It's just true. And that's not a means of validation. So I would say to them, that does not explain to me exactly why God exists. The fact that it's self-evident, that's somewhat a very personal perspective. That is not something along the lines of being absolute. The fact that it's self-evident for you may not be self-evident for me. From the point of view of the believer, the really puzzling question is how anyone could not believe. Well, because I've talked about before, and I do find somewhat a lot of comparison with respect to religion and cults in general to be something that I perceive as being an aspect of religion. I see a lot of things that to me seem very, very cultish. And in that light, not really, really good, not really, really helpful. So, that's what I'm kind of wondering about exactly why things happen and why people do what they do. But again, we're talking human beings here, so human beings behave the way they behave just because that's the way they are. That's the way your mind works. And yet, as University of California at Irvine psychologist Brett Mercier, this is David Luden, okay. Brett Mercier and his colleagues point out in a recent article, there was once a time in prehistory of our species when nobody believed in a God of any sort. I wonder that's before the point where we actually developed language. Maybe people believed it, but it was only in their minds and they had no way to express their beliefs. Our evolutionary ancestors were all atheists. But somewhere along the way, they found religion. So we're back to our original question. Why do people believe in God? As is common practice in evolutionary science, Mercier and his colleagues distinguish between ultimate and proximate causes. Okay? An ultimate cause explains how a behavior evolves in the first place. Evolution. Not talking about biological evolution here, we're talking about evolution of concepts. While a proximate cause outlines the conditions on which evolution behavior will be performed. It's interesting because those two things sound almost like they're separate. One's explanation and one is actually conditions. Let's say conditions there. The conditions of the belief and the evolution of belief. Consider, for example, birds flying south for the winter. The ultimate cause of birds migrating is increase in survival and reproduction experienced by those who seasonally move to warmer climates where food was plentiful. In contrast, the proximate cause is the decrease in daylight hours, serving as a trigger that it's time to head south. Okay, that's a condition. Religious belief of some sort is a nearly universal feature of humanity, so there's quite likely some ultimate evolutionary cause that explains it. At the same time, not all people are religious, and furthermore, the forms of belief among the religious range widely, so we need to understand the proximate causes for this variation. In their article, Mercier and colleagues outline several ultimate and proximate causes for religious belief. Okay, well, let's get the explanation of why people came. Not the fact that this is actually talking about the existence of a God. This is talking about why people believe in God. This is probably something that I'm intrinsically interested in. You know, to me, when I want to talk to people, and I don't want to sit there and find out why they're trying to prove a God exists. I would really like to know, why do they actually believe? Why is their belief in a human, a superhuman being, there? Besides thinking any else of saying that. Fully modern humans arrived on the scene about 250,000 years ago. Kind of like when Homo sapiens became out in the open. Excuse me. And until quite recently, they all lived hunter-gatherer lifestyles. In these primitive societies, the men hunted, fished, or scavenged for meat, while the women gathered fruits, roots, and vegetables. They lived in small groups of around 100 to 150 people because this was the largest population that the surrounding terrain could support. Still, these groups were considerably larger than the societies of primitive species, which tend to number in the few dozen range. Furthermore, humans are far more capable of cooperation than other primates, enabled by certain evolved cognitive mechanisms. Chief among these is a sense of agency. I hope that can tell us what that is. As tool users, humans quickly developed an understanding that they can intentionally cause things to happen. The nut cracked open because I smashed it with a rock. The apple fell because I shook the tree. Humans then apply this sense of agency to interpreting social interactions. That is to say, we not only believe we have agency, we also believe others have agency as well. Thus, we judge the actions of others depending on whether we deem them to be intentional or not. We can easily forgive the person who accidentally steps on our foot, but we really need an explanation and an apology if someone purposely treads on our toes. In fact, we're rather hypersensitive about other people's agency, inferring intention where none existed. For example, when someone cuts us off in traffic, we generally assume they did it on purpose. That is, knowing full well how dangerously they're driving rather than supposing they looked but just didn't see us. We're quick to assume that people act purposefully and discount the extent to which people's behaviors are shaped by the current circumstances and limitations. Because of hypersensitive agency detection, we also have a tendency to infer intentionality. It's not an easy word to say. Intentionality in natural processes or inanimate objects. Beliefs in water spirits and woodland spirits, specters and spooks, ghosts and demons are ancient and observed in every culture around the world. Because the natural world is complex and acts in mysterious ways, we detect agency all around us. By the way, if you think that you, an intelligent human being living in modern society, are free of such superstitious nonsense, you need to ask yourself, have you ever begged your car to start on a cold winter morning? Or have you ever complained that your computer has a mind of its own because it doesn't behave the way you want it to? We tend to automatically detect agency in inanimate objects whenever the situation is unpredictable and out of our control. This kind of animistic thinking, that is, the belief that supernatural agency inhabits the world and can influence events, is a universal human trait. Such thinking is common in children, and as adults, our animistic thinking is shaped by the norms of our culture. Animistic beliefs are also common in hunter-gatherer societies, but what they don't have is organized religion. I was wondering when they were going to start talking about religion, because we're getting into basically just general description of human behavior. Some 15,000 years ago, humans gradually began adopting agriculture. At first, humans domesticated a few animals and tended gardens to supplement their hunting and gathering. But eventually, all but a few societies around the world shifted solely to farming and herding. Agriculture can support many more people per acre of land compared with hunting and gathering, but this came with a cost. As long as our group sizes were small, we had the psychological mechanisms to deal effectively with the members of our community. If you lived day in and day out with the same 150 people, you get to know them really well. But if your numbers are in the thousands or tens of thousands, most of the people you interact with on a daily basis are strangers. Thus was life in the first cities that arose thanks to the food surpluses that agriculture yielded. At this point, we see cultural evolution taking place. Human existence depends on cooperation. When we live in small groups, cheaters are punished by other members, and they quickly learn that they have to get along. But in anonymous societies, it's easy to take advantage of others, as there's no way for the rest of the group to punish those who take advantage of the system. The solution was to invent even ever-watchful gods who will punish cheaters for us. Thus, organized religion grew hand in hand with the rise of city-states. That's interesting. That is very interesting. I'm thinking to myself, when I read that, I'm thinking they're saying that just from the way that was presented, they're saying that people did things against society, and because apparently it's easy to do that, and from the way they're describing it, there's an aspect of not being able to punish them completely, I guess. The aspects of having something there that would implement, I guess, that punishment was something that, occurred, generated, evolved, which, became religious organizations. I to be honest, I would think that I would have never thought that that would be the case, because I'm thinking, the way I think about it is that as societies grew, they became much more organized, I guess, much more controlling of the society, and the fact that there probably was at some time an aspect of evaluation and determination of when somebody was doing something that they weren't supposed to do, there was going to be consequences of that. And the basic thing is those people will be put away. And they'll be shown that there's a punishment for you not doing what you're supposed to be doing. And I would think that's the way things evolve. But here in just this last paragraph, they indicate the fact that it was an aspect of a perception, I guess, of something can be in control where you will be punished, and the punishment will technically or be perceived as being severe. May not be physically severe, but maybe psychologically severe, where it would be detrimental for people to do things because of it. I'm not really sure if I'd actually take that 100%. To me, I actually find that hard to accept. Fast forward to a dozen millennia, and here we are living in a technologically advanced society driven by science that tells us the world moves according to the laws of physics and not the whims of spirits or deities. Nevertheless, religious belief in one or more gods that watch over our actions and judge us accordingly is quite common. At the same time, religious beliefs have dropped precipitously over the last century, and here we need to look at its proximate causes. Okay, well, this here he goes. Religion came about for the aspect of people needed to be punished, and the aspect of gods was, I don't want to say generated, because it was someone probably just sounding great at his aspect of it evolved. I guess you could say, for lack of a better way of saying that, it just became something, the way people behaved around each other and the way people looked at things was this aspect is that something's up there, it's going to be watching you. And they're saying now that because of the current society and the aspect of, religion not being as important as it was in the past, there's probably a reason for that, and that's what I guess they're going to talk about now. So it's strange, because it seems like they're not going to be talking so much about exactly how did the concept of God come about in a much more concrete and explicative manner. At least I don't get an impression just from the last paragraph that's not what they're going to do. So let's see what they're going to say next. Mercier and colleagues divide the proximate causes of religious belief into three types: cognitive, motivational, and societal. One cognitive factor is an analytical thinking style. People who tend to act according to reason rather than intuition are also less likely to believe in God. Perhaps relatedly, we also see a tendency for people who are higher in intelligence to hold agnostic or atheistic beliefs. In contrast, people who are high in what's commonly called emotional intelligence, that is, the ability to easily discern the emotions and motives of others, also tend to be more religious. Of course, it's exactly this ability to read others' minds that led to the rise of religious belief in the first place, hundreds of thousands of years ago on the African savanna. Okay. There are also motivational reasons for religious belief. People who are socially isolated tend to have more religious faith, perhaps allowing them to feel they're not truly alone. Likewise, people facing death are more likely to express faith in God and an afterlife. The old saying that there are no atheists on the battlefield is no doubt true to a large extent. Furthermore, faith in God increases when situations become uncontrollable. As in the case of natural disasters, believing that God has a plan helps people regain some sense of control, or at least acceptance. Another motivational factor is self-enhancement. If you live in a society where religion is prized, it's in your best interest to say you believe, whether you truly do or not. I'm sure there are plenty of doubters in the pews at Sunday services, though none will admit it. I was one of those for most of my teenage years. And it's not uncommon to hear stories of priests or pastors who've lost their faith but continue to preach because it's the only way they can make a living. Finally, there are the societal factors that influence the degree of religious belief within societies. As a general rule, religious belief is considerably lower in developed countries compared with the underdeveloped world. For instance, Japan has one of the highest standards of living in the world, but only 4% of its population claims to be religious. Traditionally, Japan was a Buddhist country, and religion played an important role in the daily lives of the Japanese until after World War II. A similar trend has occurred in Western Europe, which many social scientists now characterize as post-Christian. The United States, with its high standard of living and high religiosity, is a glaring exception. However, as Mercier and his colleagues point out, Japan and Western Europe have universal health care and extensive social safety nets, as opposed to the U.S. The Japanese and the Europeans know their governments will come to their aid in their hour of need, but the laissez-faire attitudes of American society make people's future less certain and the belief in a benevolent God more attractive. They're kind of trying to describe from that paragraph the aspect of, are we seeing religious prominence in the United States because the government, for lack of a better word to use, is not providing a lot of support to the society, and because of it, religion becomes more of a support process. You know, saying, government's not there, but I have my religion. Religion is going to be there for me. Religion is going to be supporting me. Religion is going to help me get through my life. And they're saying the difference between, let's say, Western Europe and Japan, and the comparison here is the fact of those countries have extensive social programs in place where the impression of the government will help take care of the people is in place. And because of it, the concept is people take care of people. So the aspect of having the feeling of necessity for a religious need is not as strong because of it. So that's interesting. Although many people in industrial societies have abandoned traditional organized religion, many of them still confess to some sort of spiritual belief, such as a life force or divine spirit that pervades nature and humanity. As societies become affluent and egalitarian, perhaps people perceive less need for a benevolent God to keep watch over us. Organized religion may no longer be needed in such societies. Excuse me again. But it's still human nature to perceive agency in the complexity and unpredictability of the world, even when there is none. Oh, that's the end. Oh, I'm at the end. Huh. Okay, so I actually didn't get as much, or I didn't see as much as I thought I was going to see. I thought there was actually going to be an explicit description of actually how evolution evolved, how it grew in society, what were the conditions and reasons for it to grow, but it didn't. It basically talked about the aspects of religion came about because the aspect of the necessity to control, for lack of a better word, and in their explanation, an aspect of discipline, which couldn't maybe be applied evenly, caused the aspect of religion to evolve because it was a means of presenting to people, you don't do things correctly, the all-powerful God is going to be watching you, and you're going to pay in the end. And you could see that probably had a lot of impact because a lot of people believed in the aspect of, I'm going to go to hell, at least if we talk about the Christian religion, because Christian religion is about the one that about about a hell and a heaven kind of concept. And there's not many other religions that actually have that level of separation between right and wrong. But in the Christian religion, to talk about the aspect, if you do something wrong against your God, you're going to be isolated in this hell, which is going to be, terrible, for lack of a better way of saying that. And you can go to heaven, if you're a really good person, and be, happy for the rest of eternity. I'm wondering, too, and one of the things that I didn't see in this article, which I'm not really too impressed because it would have been something that I would have liked to have seen them to explain in a much more concrete fashion, which is the aspect of fear. For me, at least in the aspect of Christianity, because I grew up in the Western world and I grew up in the Christian society for the most part. I can say my family, and that was not very religious. And the low-level aspects of it, they were Christian, though, or they did believe in the concept of a God, even though we never talked about it. We were not religious per se, but again, it was there. So it just shows you the fact of the power of having that level of control over people, even when they were not heavily involved with it, was actually there in my personal family. And I'm wondering, from the way I look at things, with this aspect of, they did somewhat allude to it in this article, but the aspect of punishment, they didn't say per se that this is what really resulted in it, but I'm also thinking that as religion became a much more prevalent factor in society, it did so because of the aspect of an indication of, in the way that this article was writing things of right and wrong, and the aspect of the religious organizations presenting things where it's a point of punishment that will be afflicted on you when you don't follow the rules. And of course, you're going to have all kinds of religious rules. And the aspects of following those rules are in place very strongly. I'm kind of wondering, that would have been something I would have liked to see for them to explain actually how that came about. One other aspect is the underlying concept of fear of death, which for me, when I think about religion, I'm thinking that the feeling that people have about the process of getting to the point where things end and there's no continuation. And the aspect you're talking about, your continuation. For me, I find that a lot of people are terrified of death, not because of the aspect of the act of dying, but more along the lines of the consequence of dying, which is basically becoming, voided, for lack of a better way of saying it. It goes in the aspect of saying at one point in time, you're aware, and then that's gone. You basically cease existing. So you hit that point and everything stops. I find that something that's probably very difficult for people to handle. And I could say that probably was even much more difficult in, let's say, the older days, however long time ago you want to think of that being, but the aspect of when people were under much more of a control of a religious perception because the aspect of the way they felt, which is, what's going to happen? I'm going to die. Is that it? Is that the end? And I think just like a lot of things, people don't like things to end for the most part. People like the concept of continuity. I think I might have said that wrong. The process of things things being continuous. There. Let's use that way of presenting it that way. Things will never end. That specifically is a very, very Christian concept. The aspect of you die, but there's an afterlife where basically you continue on. And to me, the aspect of saying goes, yeah, but is that saying all your memories, all your reality of life is something that can move beyond, your body? And obviously that's what it has to mean. And again, in the Christian world, and I'm sorry, I can't speak of other religions. I really don't know actually how they look at this kind of concept explicitly, but in the Christian world, there's a concept of a soul. And the aspect in the Christian world is your soul is who you are. That's who you are. And for whatever reason, your soul's tied up into your body when you're alive. So I guess in that concept, it can't escape. It can't escape your body because while your body's alive, it somewhat keeps your soul attached to it. That's the perception, or at least that's the analogy, or I don't want to say explanation because it's not an explanation. It's the aspect of the way people are looking at stuff, saying goes, hey, you have a soul, and after you die, your soul will leave your body, and it will go up to God, go up to heaven, and live eternity out there, and you'll live, rest of eternity up in heaven. And of course, that's very, very, that's a very positive way of looking at the concept of death. And I can see how people could really, 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 really feel very strongly about that kind of concept. I don't want to die. But it's reality. You will die. There's no human being on this planet that's lived forever. Biological entities just don't survive in that sort of fashion. They don't. That's just just life. And people, they need to have a feeling of comfort, something that'll make them feel good about where they are headed. Everybody's headed, to the end of their physical body on this planet. And it's not something that people like to do or think about. So, this article did actually come up with a couple of interesting things. Like the aspect of, and again, where they talked about the aspect of actually how a God concept evolved, with the aspect of, where society became larger and larger and larger, and the aspect of being able to control society was needed, and the aspect of, because maybe the society itself could not control, the society itself, that this concept of religion kind of like evolved from it. And more along the lines, it could have been what people saying, they think, they came up with the concept of, let's say, the religious kind of entity, superpower entity, and so it says, hey, look, you do this stuff, and, we don't like you doing this stuff, but, you're going to do it, and you don't really realize the consequence of it. You don't realize that Yahya is up there, and he's watching you. He's a guy. Women, they don't care about you, John. This guy, he cares about you doing stuff properly, and you have to do things correctly. If you don't, you know what's going to happen to you. You're going to go to da-da-doo-doo-da. And da-da-doo-doo-da, that's not a place you want to be. That's a really bad place to be. And they don't want you to be there. Or you don't want yourself to be there, do you? I could see that the concept they're saying goes, it kind of evolved that aspect of things just migrate in that way. But again, like I said, especially that last thing I said, which is the aspect of fear of death. To me, I think that's integral. And I think, even though they described religion evolving from here, I am not a historian. So I actually don't know how it evolved. I have actually no real concrete concept of actually how religion evolved. I'm just going on the aspect of how I think it might have, evolved. Excuse me. I do think the aspect of fear of death is a heavy impact on human beings. Now, the aspect of saying, you're going to end. And the fear of you just stopping. That terrifies people. I could say, I don't like the idea of it, but I'm actually accepting of it. I know that's going to happen. I know at one point in time, everything's going to stop, and that's going to be the end of me. It's going to go up to this point in time, and that's it. From this point to that point, that's your existence. After that, it's nothing. You're no longer around. You're no longer there. I accept that that's what's going to happen. Do I like it? Well, I don't like it because nobody likes the aspect of saying, hey, things are going to end, but, you come to the acceptance that that's what's going to happen. And I think that's enough for this little article review. And again, I guess it's somewhat of a psychological representation. It wasn't as detailed as I was expecting it to be. I found it actually was very generalized, which I was actually looking for it to be more concrete, more explicative, but it wasn't. So let's leave it at that. And I'm getting to the point where I'm going to want to do my review of Dr. Francis Collins, as I mentioned before. So I'm just going to get that ready now. So don't pay attention. I'm just going to go and get things ready. La 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 la. Here we are. Okay, I'll maximize this so it takes the whole screen out. There we go. Okay. So as I mentioned, this is about Dr. Francis Collins. keep thinking, no, I have this right. Is that the right name of this guy? Dr. Francis, yes, Dr. Francis Collins. Excuse me again. Okay, so again, this is, again, he was the leader of the Genome Project. And we did research for him. We found out he actually worked for the U.S. Government and the research organizations there that did this research. So he worked in that area. He's a highly educated person. And again, talking about the previous thing where they say goes somewhat, more religious people are somewhat, not religious, somewhat more, I don't want to say intelligent because that's not the right word to use. I don't know if that's actually what they used in the article that we just read. But the access of people who actually went through more education, they're saying are more likely to be atheist. Now this guy, he's got a doctorate in psychology. He's got a high level of education behind him. And he sort of said, he was an atheist in the earlier part of his life. And as I told you when I originally discussed this before, is that in this video, he's going to discuss actually how he evolved and became religious. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to go through this, and I'm going to give my comments and my opinions of it, just so that way you know that I'm not just accepting this as something that's a representation of truthfulness. It's a representation of what this person had gone through in their life. But if I see something that's a question mark, I'm going to bring it out. And you religious people, I really want you to comment on my I want you to comment on my questions if I bring up something that maybe you think is not 100% accurate or correct, or really in line with what is being presented. You got to let me know that, because those are the things that I want to hear about. Now, if you do comment, I may comment back to you about, again, some sort of aspect of clarification that, but I'm hoping people are going to be okay with that once they start responding to my questions, because I've got I think almost 20 videos I've done now, and I've got no comments. Actually, I say one of them I did get comments, and it actually was from the person who did the video, and they were not happy with my review of his video. But again, I can't feel sorry about someone getting upset because I'm doing a review of their video. I think that's personally, I think that's normal. You're going to do something, and someone's going to, make a comment on it. And if you're going to do this in a social environment, on a social media platform, where potentially hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people are going to see it, you're going to have to deal with the fact that potentially someone's going to make a comment on it. And like I said, the person I did actually communicate with, he was not happy at all with my review. But again, we're going to go over this review of, again, Dr. Collins. And we're going to see, exactly how we got to where he got to. So let's start. Okay.
I began to realize that the evidence for the existence of God, while not proof, was actually pretty interesting. And it certainly made me realize that atheism would no longer be for me an acceptable choice, that it was the least rational of the options.
He's obviously going to talk more about it, but the point I'm going to make is rational, to me, is a very concrete statement. And while I know how he's going to go about this, for me, I specifically require a concrete explanation of that rationality. And if I don't see it, I have problems.
Coming from the study of nature. And I hadn't really thought about them, but here they were. Here's one which seems like an obvious statement, but maybe it's not so obvious. There is something instead of nothing. No reason that should be. This phrase of Wigner, the Nobel laureate in physics, caught my eye because I had been involved, of course, as a graduate student working with quantum mechanics with Schrödinger's equation. And one of the things that had appealed to me so much about mathematics and physics and chemistry was how it was that this particular kind of depiction of matter and energy works. I mean, it really works well. And a theory that is correct often turns out to be simple and beautiful. And why should that be? Why should mathematics be so unreasonably effective in describing nature? There's the Big Bang. The fact that the universe had a beginning, as virtually all scientists are now coming to the conclusion, about 13.7 billion years ago, in an unimaginable singularity, where the universe, smaller than a golf ball, suddenly appeared and then began flying apart and has been flying apart ever since.
Excuse
and
me.
we can calculate that singularity by noticing just how far those galaxies are receding from us and things like the background microwave radiation, the echo of that Big Bang. And of course, that presents a difficulty because our science cannot look back beyond that point. And it seems that something came out of nothing. Well, nature isn't supposed to allow that. So if nature's not able to create itself, how did the universe get here? You can't postulate that that was created by some natural force, or you haven't solved the problem, because then, okay, what created that natural force? So the only plausible, it seemed to me, explanation is that there must be some supernatural force that did the creating. And of course, that force would not need to be limited by space or even by time. Oh, now we're getting somewhere. So, all right, let's imagine there is a creator, let's call that creator God, who is supernatural, who's not bounded by space, not bounded by time, and is a pretty darn good mathematician. And it's starting to make some sense here. Well, God must also be an incredible physicist. Because another thing I began to realize by a little more reading is that there is this phenomenal fine-tuning of the universe that makes complexity and therefore life possible. Those of you who study physics and chemistry will know that there's a whole series of laws that govern the behavior of matter and energy. They are simple, beautiful equations, but they have constants in them, like the gravitational constant or the speed of light. And you cannot derive, at the present time, the value of those constants. They are what they are. They're givens. You have to do the experiment and measure them. Well, suppose they were a little different. Would that matter? Would anything change in our universe if the gravitational constant was a little stronger or a little weaker?
I'm just going to stop things there because these are things that I have problems with, I guess. If you've seen other videos I've done, things like this have come up, and the aspects of statements that are being made about how things are happening, how things are going, the reasons for something is difficult to accept. And some of these things here, like I said, this particular person, who's a very intelligent person, like again, this person's got a doctorate, so you sit to say he should be able to think very, very logically, but these things don't really make sense to me. And again, nature provides interesting pointers of God. There's something instead of nothing. I actually have no idea what that means nature-wise. There's something instead of nothing. What does that mean? So, there's something instead of nothing. I don't understand exactly why that proves God. The unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics. If you know anything about mathematics, you know it's very reasonable. It has rules and laws that are very explicit, and that the results of mathematics gets to a specific conclusion. Now, is that God? I don't see it. The Big Bang, and as he described it here, he's going to get into it a bit later on about the aspects of exactly where God comes into this, but even than that, and I've said it before, that's a conclusion that was made without any validation. when he gets into it. But I'm going to leave it like that. Let you people think of what I'm thinking about. And if you've seen my other videos, then you know what I'm talking about. And the precise tuning of physical constants in the universe, and that I don't. So I told people, you're talking about nature, and you're trying to give an aspect that nature can't be nature unless nature's been put together a certain way. I'm thinking, that's just the way it works. That's just the way nature works. The aspects of a perception of a process, a mechanism that was put in place to make it work that way, I think that's jumping to conclusions. But again, the aspects of what Dr. Collins is going to make is the aspect of, we're talking about, what's the best possibility. And, again, with the aspects of religious perception, there's something along the lines of possibility that's more concrete than others. And, of course, their concept of possibility, or at least what they think is more possible, from someone who doesn't actually look at it that point of view, can't get to that conclusion. But again, to me, I look at the stuff and I can see what people can sit there and say that. And I say, that's fine. Now you get to the point, or now I tell the people, they're at the point of saying, okay, great. You're pointing out all these things, and I don't agree with the things you're saying, but I'll accept the fact that you're stating them. But now you have to come and show me, this God you're talking about. And that's where things get difficult. I'm not the kind of person who gets into philosophical kind of strategy and aspects of utilizing concepts in, let's say, in the science realm as reasoning for it, because again, a lot of the reason is based on conclusions that are made without explanation. And I really have a hard time with that.
Some days I think it's a little stronger, but I don't think it really is. So that calculation got done, particularly in the 1970s, by Barrow and Tipler, and the answer was astounding. That if you take any of these 15 constants and you tweak them just a tiny little bit, the whole thing doesn't work anymore. Take gravity, for instance. If gravity was just 1 part in about 10 billion weaker than it actually is, then after the Big Bang, there would be insufficient gravitational pull to result in the coalescence of stars and galaxies and planets and you and me. And you'd end up, therefore, with a infinitely expanding sterile universe.
Okay, so I'll just conclude the aspect of its finalization is talking about the aspects of probability. And as I stated, people are trying to give points to nature being the way it is because it was put together that way. There's absolutely zero evidence of that. I don't care how probable or improbable you want to state it, the fact is, it is the way it is. And if you want to indicate the fact that it can only be from a God, I'll say, I'll allow you to say that, but you have to show me this God you're talking about. Because the aspect they're saying, this is the way things happened. It happened because of this, happened because of this being. I say, fine, show me this being. I'd like to have a talk with him. He can explain to me all the reasons why he chose to put things together the way he put them, Is there a specific reason for that, If it was just so life can happen, I say, well, but is it necessary? What's the whole purpose of that? Again, I don't know, and these are things I have problems with.
First of all, maybe theory will someday tell us that these constants have to have the value they have, that there is some a priori reason for that. Most physicists I talk to don't think that's too likely. There might be relationships between them that have to be maintained, but not the whole thing. A second possibility. Perhaps we are one of an almost infinite series of other universes that have different values of those constants. And of course, we have to be in the one where everything turned out right, or we wouldn't be having this conversation. So that's the multiverse hypothesis, and it is a defensible one as long as you're willing to accept the fact that you will probably never be able to observe those infinite series of other parallel universes. So that requires quite a leap of faith. The third possibility is that this is intentional, that these constants have the value they do because that creator God, who is a good mathematician, also knew that there was an important set of dials to set here if this universe that was coming into being was going to be interesting.
Okay, so those are the three ways the universe we exist in can happen, and he gave you the reasons why the first two were somewhat not really possible. And he came into the last one, and he'll indicate the fact that, at least the next statements, he's going to say, why he feels one is better than the other. And I say to myself, he forgot one. Nature. It's natural. The universe here is because of natural causes. Those causes are just the way, let's say matter, elements, anything you want to think about the construction of the universe, for lack of a better way of saying that, has occurred. And it's all natural. Just the way things just started to go together. I don't like to sit there and tack stuff on top of it. Says, well, it can't be this way, it's got to be that way because no, that's what it is, that way because that's the way it is. There's no indication of any reason why it should be any other different. It's just nature. That's the way nature works.
So take those three possibilities, and which of them seems most plausible? Apply Occam's razor, if you will, which says that the simplest explanation is most likely correct. Well, I come down on number 3, especially because I've already kind of gotten there in terms of the other arguments about the idea of a creator.
Okay, so again, this is his conclusion. And Occam razor. Now, this guy's really, really intelligent, and the scientific community, if they heard this saying, goes, a God is the most reasonable, most likely cause? This is to say, that's absolutely, questionable, as being explained here. I don't know actually how they got to that conclusion, or how he got to that conclusion, that's the most likely. I sit to say to myself, I'll say, okay, you want to use, Occam razor and that kind of thing? Okay, well, show me why it's the most reasonable solution. Answer, let's say. Why? Why is the aspect of an all-powerful God the only reason this universe can exist? You got to explain that to me, because you're leaving out completely nature. In fact, you're saying nature only exists because of God. Nature can't exist by itself. Why does it need a God? The aspect is, can things just propagate naturally from the beginning? He did mention the Big Bang at the beginning of his topic, and everybody knows, anybody who knows anything about the Big Bang, about the concept of the singularity, is the aspect that it expanded. Its expansion was from the aspects of a massive energy force, quantity, whatever way you want to look at that. It's a huge amount of energy, and it expanded. It expanded and it started cooling. As it cooled, things started to, get put in place, let's say. That's what I say. That's when atoms started to appear. They didn't appear out of nothing. They appeared out of the energy. And everything else came about it. Aspects you have, like material, for lack of a better way of saying that, and all this material started to accumulate. And we got planets, we got universes, that kind of thing. It's just, and they all stick together because of gravity. And that just happens to be just the way, gravity works with respect to massive, with respect to mass. It's just natural. It's the way it works. The whole thing is, hey, did someone make it work that way? Don't know, but why? Why would that be necessary? And that's where he's getting to. And I don't think I would never use Occam razor to validate that. And I think anybody in the scientific community, I would say most likely they would not also agree that that's the most likely explanation. As I said, it's nature. That's the most likely explanation from my perspective. Religious people, yes, I'm still thinking about you guys. If you're out there, if you can explain to me why the aspect of a all-powerful being is the only reason why our universe can exist the way that it exists, you have to explain it to me. And I'm not really going to accept the aspect that says, oh, well, that's Occam razor. It's the most reasonable. I'm not asking for that. I'm asking for the explanation of why it's the most reasonable. Excuse me again.
Well, now we come back to Lewis in that first chapter of Mere Christianity, which is called Right and Wrong as a Clue to the Meaning of the Universe. And here what is being talked about is the moral law. Now, I didn't take philosophy in college, so I didn't really quite know what this was all about. But as I began to recognize what the argument was, it rang true. It rang true in a really startling way. One of those things where you realize, I've known about this all my life, but I've never really quite thought about it. So what's the argument? The argument is that we humans are unique in the animal kingdom by apparently having a law that we are under, although we seem free to break it because that happens every day. And the law is that there's something called right and there's something called wrong, and we're supposed to do the right thing and not the wrong thing. So clearly the moral law is universal, but it is influenced in terms of particular actions and how they size up in the right and wrong assessment. Well, the moral law sometimes calls us to do some pretty dramatic things, particularly in terms of altruism, where you do something sacrificial for somebody else. And what about that? People may argue, and they have, and they will continue to, that this can all be explained by evolution, and those are useful arguments to look at. So for instance, if you're being altruistic to your own family, you can see how that might make sense from an evolutionary perspective, because they share your DNA. So if you're helping their DNA survive, well, it's yours too. And so that makes sense from a Darwinian argument about reproductive fitness. But I do think when people try to argue that morality can be fully explained on evolutionary grounds, that's a little bit too easy. That's a little bit too much of a just so story. And perhaps it might ought to be thought about as potentially having some other reflected reason for its presence. And I would ask the question, because Lewis asked it in his chapter, if you were looking not just for evidence of a God who was a mathematician and a physicist, but a God who cared about human beings and who stood for what was good and holy and wanted his people to also be interested in what is good and holy. Wouldn't it be interesting to find written in your own heart this moral law which doesn't otherwise make sense and which is calling you to do just that? That made a lot of sense to me.
Okay, I'm just going to stop it there. In these last sections, we're talking about the concept of morality, and I've mentioned this in previous videos, that I do not like to talk about moral concepts, I guess. This aspect of morality is apparent because it was placed in us by this all-powerful being. And I have a lot of problems with that. I think that morality has got nothing to do with the concept of a God. the way people think, the way people behave, the way people act. To me, that's natural. The aspect of necessity of some sort of being pitting these moral instincts into you is very questionable from my perspective. If people can explain this to me, that would be great.
Now, about this time, I had also arrived at a point that was actually not comforting, which was the realization that if the moral law was a pointer to God, and if God was good and holy, I was not. And as much as I tried to forgive myself for actions that were not consistent with that moral law, they kept popping up. And therefore, just as I was beginning to perceive the person of God in this sort of blurry way, that image was receding because of my own failures. And I began to despair of whether this would ever be a relationship that I could claim or hope to have because of my own shortcomings. And into that area of increasing anxiety came the realization that there is a person in one of these faiths who has the solution to that. And that's the person of Jesus Christ, who not only claimed to know God, but to be God, and who in this amazing and incomprehensible at first, but ultimately incredibly sensible, uplifting, sacrificial act, died on the cross and then rose from the dead to provide this bridge between my imperfections and God's holiness in a way that made more sense than I ever dreamed it could. I had heard those phrases about Christ died for your sins, and I thought that was so much gibberish, and suddenly it wasn't gibberish at all.
Okay, to be honest with you, I'm a bit confused about the aspects of exactly how Jesus came into this. It seems to be the aspect of that there were a lot of questions and Jesus. They're saying, yeah, this and this, this and this and this and this, and here's Jesus. I don't understand the validity behind this person per se, and exactly how things are the way they are because of him, or at least how things migrated to where we're at because of him. I don't know. I saw the end of this and I'm thinking to myself, this gave me no conclusion to his presentation. This is actually the last part. There's a little part after here with respect to the person who put this video together and given his input on it. And before we get to that, I just want to give the aspect of my perception of the video presentation, or the presentation by Dr. Collins, and the aspect of surprise, because I would think to myself, I would not expect to be seeing a representation from an extremely intelligent person making claims that he was making. To me, they were completely unscientific. I don't know how those claims were ever made. And again, it comes down to the aspect of, and I mentioned this before, is I have no problem with anybody making a claim. I just ask for proof of that claim. Give me the facts. That will give me the ability to identify how that claim was achieved. And that way I can understand what they were saying. And again, Dr. Collins in here just made a bunch of statements, and indication-wise, some of it was just, it is the way it is because. And I don't want to hear that. And I don't want to hear that from a scientist. Because scientists in general don't accept things just for the sake of accepting them. And unfortunately, Dr. Collins, in this light, that's what he was doing. So while I think the guy, he's obviously very intelligent, he did some very, very, very impressive things, I have a lot of problem with the aspect of someone with his level of education presenting things in the way he was presenting them. To me, they were very, very irrational, very questionable, very unsupported. I need the factual information behind it. Religious people, if you can maybe indicate to me why you think his presentation was accurate, that would be great. If you can explain why some of the things he stated was correct, that would be great. If you do state the fact that it's correct because it's correct, that's the same kind of conclusion that I told you I don't accept. That's what they're saying. It's got to be this way just because. You know, it's got to be this way because that's the best answer to the question, the best solution to the question. Talking Occam razor here. The simplest solution is usually the correct one. And it comes down to the aspect is, you have to prove to me why the aspect of a God is the simplest solution. If you say it's because I feel it's the simplest solution, that's not concrete evidence. That's just your feeling. You have to sit down and specify, go, this one has this probability, this kind of da. You have to go through all the different aspects saying those, instead of saying, okay, yeah. And I should just, I'll throw in my way of looking and says, what about nature? You know? And again, I know an aspect of why he didn't get into explicitly. There are videos I went through where they talked about the aspects of probability and nature being highly improbable, which is very questionable again in that light. But the whole thing is that as unreasonable as this extremely all-powerful God that nobody knows anything about being the cause of it? Let's continue with the final, and then we'll end the video.
So this is the dire reality, the seemingly hopeless human condition that God is telling us that he himself has a solution to. He has a solution to this problem that is cursing us all. And it's mysterious, and it's not what you would expect. It's this idea that the wound is healed by the wounded healer. In order to explain this idea, let me go to John 3:16, but also John 17, the far less familiar verse to people. John 3:16 says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life." John 17 says, "For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but in order that the world might be saved through him."
Okay, so that's the end of the video. Sorry, I keep doing this where I think I'm stopping it, but I'm not stopping it. That final conclusion, I just left it in there just because I just want to have somebody, with an aspect of saying this is what somebody from a religious perspective found in this video. And he somewhat concluded with what Dr. Collins concluded at the end, that it's Jesus Christ. I actually have no idea exactly why that is an explanation for everything. Why everything is the way it is because of Jesus Christ. I don't understand that, so to me that's very confusing. I think I'm going to leave things there. I don't have anything more to say about that. And what I'm thinking of now is I really want to get a chat in with people who actually are believers in God, and nobody's joined my chat, so I'm assuming nobody saw it, and if they did, they decided not to come. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to see if I can find anything on YouTube Live with a current active chatting channel, I guess, and see if I can chat maybe with some religious people. Do you believe? Actually, maybe I should do that. Live chat for in God. Again, we want live because we want to see who's actually active. Okay, nope. Plead blood, Jesus, nope. God says, I need you, nope. Your purpose is calling. Faith failing in thy body and God live. Now this looks like, I don't know if this is a live chat or if it's just a discussion between two people. I have the audio off here, and I will leave it off because I'm not concerned. Welcome to the very first live stream of Divine Harmony Faith, a podcast created to inspire, empower, and encourage. In today's powerful session, tap the bell so you never tell us in this chat how many people they have. They only have 191 subscribers, so they're starting pretty much somewhere where I'm starting. Don't forget to join the community, whether you're a long-time believers, Facebook group. Let's grow, walk faith in God's kingdom. Support the show. Livetree, check Divine Harmony, sign up, join this channel to get access to perks. Check out our cozy sweaters, explore our books, read our blog. Okay, they're not showing it, but I'll see if they say anything. All right.
The first, if I would have even had heard just cleansing, right? If I would have just heard that, I would have definitely just been like, poof, brain on poof, right? So then you go back and she's gone after she told you to do all of this stuff. Wow. Yeah. And you have no idea where she went. You don't know where she's going. Nothing.
No, nothing. And then I kind of just chalked it up to like, whatever, she just took the money and ran type thing. And so then, fast forward.
Okay, doesn't look like they've, let's see if any of these websites or these links are connecting us to, nope, that's just taking us to, I guess, their channel. Today's Christ. Don't forget tap bell if you're in there. There's nothing here that's showing an aspect of the two people talking, but I guess that's something they've prepared themselves. And they don't have any kind of, well, they're obviously chatting with each other, so they actually have some sort of communication system together for them to chat. So support the show, PayPal, Linktree, check Divine Harmony, sign up for, join this channel, shop our merchandise, explore our books, ready blog. They don't have any, I don't think this is here. It's probably just going again to that same channel. Yeah, it's just their channel. It does not look like they're reading the chat. So I'm going to stop it there. It almost looked like that was a possibility. And Tameable Tongue. Go in here. I'm looking at this and saying, she's a gorgeous black woman. And this does not look like a live chat. Not live chat. Live chat is over here, and I'm not looking to get in with people there. Easter 2020. Geez, well, Easter's over, so not sure what they're talking about. Doesn't look like they're talking. Prophecy updates. I see a person here. let's see if this person is doing anything that I can talk with. Okay, first of all, let's see what their channel is about. Join, blah, 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 blah. Again, that's just a dab. Please be courteous and support to others. Learn more Minute of Prayer Ministries. Anniversary. Thank you so much for support. How to give your faith in alignment. She's not doing anything there. So I'll just send a message to see what she says. I don't want to join any of the channels because I don't want to get caught up into joining a bunch of channels and not, having to unjoin them later on because they're just got nothing in them. So that one, we'll just pass it, obviously. Heathen, talk heathen. Let's see if they're sane. Eight watching now. Okay. Okay. More. Big one too. Don't like commercial coming. Don't know why they're advertising for Google. Find our links here. Be found here. They have a podcast, but I'm not looking to go join a podcast. Let's see if they'll interact with me. Oh, no, wait a minute. This is, what's his name? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, this is a person. Yeah, I know this guy now. Now that I see him, he's actually somebody who is against religion. Walk by faith and not your emotional Christian motivations. I don't think this is live. It looks like it's just video. Declare spiritual welfare. Leave it in God's hands. That looks like it's just a... Yeah, I wonder if anybody here will talk to me in this, I don't know, this band? Is it the band that's actually doing things live? More? Our website, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Yeah, I'm guessing that nobody here. I'm assuming they're a religious vocal group or vocal instrument, a religious singing group, whatever. Praise, worship, tongue of fire, backsender, folio, psalm, prayer binding. I'm thinking this is more along the lines of what I'm seeing. This looks more like a preaching activity, so I don't think it's a call-in, even though YouTube, newsletter, pray when, yeah. So nothing there. Doesn't look like anything live there. Okay, looks like music. Interesting, because I put live chat and I'm getting nothing related to live chat. Wondering how else can I say that? Nobody's joining my live stream. Yeah. Just looks looks like a nope, nope, nope. Okay. Not seeing nothing. I think I just saw that after stuff a few sections up. It's another prayer service. Prayer service. That's the end. Okay. I wonder how I can say. Oops. Call in. See if there's anything like that. No. Nope. Nope. Oh, join us. Let's see what they're doing. If it's actually a call-in program. Join us Monday morning, 9 a.m. p.m. We believe. Whether you call unto me, you don't watch. Call to action live. Ways to connect. Watch similar messages. Ways to give. Partner. Okay, it's more along the lines of asking for money. Doesn't look like they're a call-in show. Is that musician show? Musicians, I guess. Whew. I would think that call-in should give you a call-in. Shows that they're call-in events. Talk Heathen. That's what I was looking at before, and I said again, I saw the guy who runs it, and they're not there to actually talk about faith, they're there to talk about religion. I should say they're there to talk about the reasons why religion is not a good thing to follow. Okay, nobody's got a live chat. A call-in show. Yeah. Yeah. Now I know this is a call-in show, but I know these characters. I think this is not. That's not a live show. Yeah, I want live shows. Join us. God said, "Pray with us and watch what happens." I think I looked at that one. That's not a call-in show, is it? Yeah, I just looked at that, and that's a lot of advertisements for selling stuff, but that's interesting. This was live, but I think this is actually these are actually shows. I know the Atheist Experience in down in Texas, and it's got nothing to do about the belief in God, so not going to help me out. Talk Heathen, and that's another show. Again, they're not talking about God. Victory Channel, live stream. I'm not getting the impression that's actually a call-in show. Yeah. It's too bad. I'm going to have to search because that's probably going to be another way for me to actually interact with the religious people is to call into shows where they're actually having talks with everybody. You know, maybe I can get access to the community I want to get access to that fashion. But again, as you can see, it doesn't look like inside here I can find one that actually has that. So, yeah. Okay, I'm going to leave it like that then. I wanted to find somebody that, I want to find a channel on YouTube that actually had a call-in, that I could actually call in and find out what they're doing. And I'm not sure exactly how this got here. It looks like it's a gaming show. So I'll leave it there, and we'll conclude things there. I want to thank you very much for joining my joining my chat. I'm hoping that if you do see this, that it interests you, and it comes on. When it comes on, you can join me and we can have a talk. I'm trying to run the show at a regular basis now. I was on 11 a.m. I switched it to 1 p.m. to bring it a little bit more consistent with probably trying to catch everybody at a more reasonable hour. So trying to do that. And hoping to get people to join my channel, subscribe to it. That would be great. And if you like what you see, I hope you subscribe. I'll leave things there, and I'll thank you again very much.